Well, welcome everyone. It's exciting to have our first responsive org event for 2020. I've just been talking to our panel. Some people have been involved in responsive org, which is a worldwide movement since 2013, I gather. And it was originally started by a group of, I'll say renegades, but people that were collaborators, did things differently, that worked for this company called Yammer, that joined another company called Microsoft. And part of the thinking was, it's not things to be responsive, it's not about the tools you use. So in this case, we're using a Teams live event, but it's about organizations being more responsive, more agile to things in the world. And we use tools like Teams and Yammer to do that, to be more connected, to be more agile, to be less hierarchical, for example. So we have run some events over the years in Sydney and Melbourne, and we are the sort of this group is the Australian part of Responsive Org, and then really didn't do anything last year, but 2020 happened, and we've had this pandemic. Well, we had we've also had bushfires and we've had other things, but there's never been, I think, more important time for organizations to pivot, for individuals to pivot and be more responsive. And so if you actually look at responsive.org, the website and the manifesto, it's all those things about being transparent, doing things differently, that's so super important. So, and partly it's also about experimenting. And today is a bit of an experiment. So we've got 7 speakers. They all could talk for half an hour at least on this topic. It's a great group, and so we want to give a chance for everyone to of our panelists to have a say, and I'll introduce them as we ask the first question. And we also want you in the audience to have a say, so please use the chat function. After we've asked the first question, we'll take some of those questions, and I suspect it's going to be very much a conversation and less of a presentation. We have very, very few slides. So appreciate you all joining. I'll go through, we'll introduce people as we bring them to the screen. The first I'm going to ask is Kjaer, who is the founder of Swoop. And Kjaer has been involved in Responsive Org right from the beginning. So the first question I have for you, Kjaer, is, in 2020, how has your organization, or most importantly, Swoop's customers, been more responsive this year? But also tell us about the your involvement with Responsive as well. So you get 2 questions.
Thank you very much. Mark, I was at the very first Responsive Org conference in San Francisco in 2017, I think it was, which was fantastic. I was inspired particularly by a talk by a guy called Aaron Dickton, and I've got his book here that I recommend for everyone to read, called Brave New Work. It's got a lot of the responsive material in it. Really enjoyed it. In terms of what our customers are doing, well, it's interesting to see this whole interest in working out loud, sharing, updating people about what's happening. Within Swoop, that's pretty easy. We're just 20 people, and we've been a remote virtual organization from day one. So we don't have an org chart. I'm thinking about whether we should have one. Can't really see a purpose. It's probably easy to say that when you're a relatively small and nimble organization. But if we were double, triple, or whatever, I'm not sure when's the right time to have an org chart. I don't feel I can't see it coming anytime soon. What we've done inside the company, there's a couple of things that we wanted to try out. One is, we heard a lot of people having these, innovation time and time when you can dedicate to innovate. So we never felt that we had to dedicate time to do that before, because we thought that's just what we do as a part of what we do. But this year we've actually started having a dedicated innovation initiative and make sure, particularly that our tech people that can get caught up in operational matters, that they actually have time to sit and fiddle and sort of try things out. So that's one thing we tried this year. And the other thing that we've just completed is our first proper marketing strategy. Like after 6 years, we actually have one, which we haven't had before. We just done things. And this was run by, I think, in Dignan's words, it's called a SLAM team, a self-managed, lean team with audacious goals. I think they call them a SLAM team. No leadership, you self-nominate who wants to be in the team, you run off and do it. And they've done a fantastic marketing strategy. So I'm really excited that we take the responsive org principles and so much as where we feel it's appropriate and when we can, we're certainly trying to live the values.
Fantastic. Great, Kai. We will come back to you, but next, I'd like to ask the same question of Rita. Rita is an enterprise social expert and a communication expert. I've spoken at conferences with her in Vancouver as part of IABC, and I know that she's having an interesting 2020. So how do you feel that what you've seen are organisations being more responsive in 2020?
Rita, you're on mute.
Oh, there we go. Now I'm not anymore. Can you hear me now? Great. Okay. Let's start again. So in my working with my work with clients and in my writing, I've talked to lots of people this year about what's been going on, and there are 4 themes that I've observed that are kind of occupying organisations. One I would call this existential tipping point. So people have been at home. We've all sat at home for months now. I am in Melbourne, so I still am at home. And we've asked ourselves these questions as we've sat around our kitchen tables or whatever and said, what is it that I really want out of life? I've got time to think about this. And, actually, I'm quite enjoying not having to do this commute. I'm quite enjoying not having to drive my car or catch the train or go to work. And, actually, it seemed kind of difficult to work from home, but now I'm doing it. And organisations are finding ways to actually work in distributed ways. So where before we found this stuff quite difficult. So I think that organisations now, the ping pong tables, the beer fridge at work, the kind of the pull of the mothership, it's just not there anymore. I just think that the cachet of that has really gone away as people have had this time out baking bread or doing exercise, whatever they've been doing. And so I think organisations need to ask themselves, what policies do we need to put into place now to attract talent, to keep people that we want to work for us, where people have sat at home and gone, well, do I want to get out of bed and do the things that I've been doing, all these years now, or do I want to live my life differently? So I think that's organisations that are, aware of this and now thinking of kind of breaking down their people policies, etc., to make them friendlier to address some of these sort of existential things that we've been experiencing. So it's a first point. Second point is related to this is all of a sudden organisations that were quite bureaucratic, and like I love enterprise social, I think there's nothing better to put that in place to flatten the hierarchy in an organisation. But I hear a lot of organisations talking about bottling the good stuff. So previously decision making would take forever. Now actually, a pandemic comes along and we're able to get our act together really, really quickly. So I hear organisations that are being responsive, consciously having this conversation on how do we bottle the good stuff and how do we shed permanently some of that stuff that used to make it really hard for us to kind of do our work. So like flexible working, faster decision making, all those sort of things. And I think too, some of that is about making distributed work sustainable as well. So I think some of us have kind of run home and we've turned on the technology and patted ourselves on the back, but it's almost like we're holding our breath a bit and thinking this too shall pass and we'll just go back to the way we used to work. And I just don't think that's going to happen. So the third thing for me is related to the tools. I think we're in the car, we're driving the car in first gear, second gear at best. We still haven't really worked out how to use technology in kind of smart ways and purposeful ways. I still think there's a lot of runway there for organisations, but I think they're aware of it. I think that they're conscious of the fact that, we're kind of making some of this stuff up as we go along here. And so organisations that are going to thrive in the future are going to understand this and make it easier for their people to work in distributed ways in a more sustainable way. And finally, and I think I saw this on LinkedIn in promotion of this event, purpose really matters. You know, organisations that have been unclear about who they are and what they stand for, that don't have a clear proposition and a clear reason for people to kind of jump out of bed to come to work, you know, they're going to struggle. I think people have long memories. Through this pandemic, they're going to remember how their people were treated, how their customers were treated. These things are going to stick and stay. So organisations that remember this and don't think about living lives in a transactional way will do better than those that, you know, just think that this is a little moment in time and people will forget about everything that's happened. So they're kind of the big four themes that I see is technology only being driven in first and second gear, organisations are re-rallying around purpose, bottling the good stuff, and getting to this existential tipping point and setting ourselves up to address some of the things that people now want.
Fantastic, Rita, and I do hope things that open up a bit more for you in Melbourne in the next few weeks. We'll see on Sunday, I guess. Now, let's go to Alister. Alister has written an amazing book called Designing Collaboration, and so he could definitely do a lot on this subject, but I wonder in 5 minutes, Alister, if you can boil down what you've seen about organisations being more responsive this year. And we're going to start by saying, don't start on mute, all right? We see it's an experiment we're learning as we go, all right?
That's probably the best advice, actually, because I was about to start talking, and I'm sure that's just the nature of Zoom calls. Yeah, look, I'd actually like to share a slide. You know, this sort of conversation is probably not great for slides, but I do want to share one because it sort of cuts to the essence of responsive org and market. It's something I stole from your invitation. So I'm just going to quickly share a page. Just tell me if you can see that okay. Oops, where is it? It's there. Yep. That one there. Can you see that?
Yep.
So this is, I stole this, Mark, from your invite to the to this session, and I'll put a ring around the ones that I think, you know, most applicable to sort of the work that I've done. And you know, it struck me when I was looking at this that this really kind of reflects this fulcrum, you know, this sort of seesawing thing where we have structured on one end and organic on the other end. And I think for me, you know, in the last 15 years or whatever it is it's been, to doing this work, that we've been trying to get organisations to move from the left across to the right. And when you talk about responsive org as being the organisation that sort of balances these things really nicely, I think it's difficult for any organisation really at any time to get that balance right, because this area on the left over here, on the right, the organic digital-based working is the thing that organisations have still been sort of learning about, or were learning about before this all came along. So I'll drop out of that just so that you don't stare at a slide, you know, while I'm talking. I'm assuming I'm back, and so really, you know, I think when we fast forward to 2020, you know, everything is about the pivot. You know, we used to kind of try and encourage organisations to move towards, you know, the right, towards organic working. But now it's a pivot, you know, and I don't know about everyone else, but, you know, the word pivot was something I'd never used or never heard unless I was talking to somebody who knew, you know, Excel. But all of a sudden it's just everywhere. And as an organisation, my own organisation, you know, in Gnosis, we had to pivot. We had a whole sort of digital team building kind of kit, if you like, all set to go with boxes and cards and everything just about to be printed out. We hadn't hit the go button. And then suddenly everything had to go online. So we had to be responsive, very responsive amongst ourselves in order to, you know, pivot everything to digital. So that was our own kind of personal experience. But I think, in the case of most organisations, it's obviously the first sort of, tug in all this was remote working. Get the tools out there. That's the kind of, first dimension in responding to this is to make sure people have the tools for remote working, because you simply have to pivot to digital, and to make the whole way an organisation operated, you have to move towards digital tools. But I think all of that kind of undertaking was about taking your existing modes of working and trying to keep them working in a digital environment. So there's no real pivotal change, no real sort of deep change going on there. It was just keep the organisation ticking over, just keep it happening. There's a second dimension to that, which is the really important one, which is the people side of it, which is helping staff to deal with all of that, isolation, stress, and all these kind of things that people are not used to because they're now working at home and got all these things going on. But the end game, as I've seen it, has still been to try and make existing work structures operate in an environmental, in a sort of COVID kind of world. The third dimension, which I think is everyone's at a very early stage, is where you actually take those first two things. You get the tech in place, you get the human side of it supported, but then there's the thing of how do you really still develop this organic mode of working, rather than bringing across your structured ways of working. How do you actually change that up and say, okay, it actually is a different environment. We could go back to first principles and to start asking the questions that Rita was talking about as well. What is it that we really want to do? What are the things that we want our teams to do? Just ask the really pivotal questions, using that word again, sorry. But, asking those really deep questions. And to me, it's been all about going back to first principles. There's the opportunity to go back to first principles and say, how do we really want this organisation to operate? And that's very different to just getting remote working happen. It goes beyond the tools, very much around behaviours, or form all the behaviours and practices that organisations will evolve to make part of their ongoing journey. So, to me, it's I think we were part of the way there before COVID worked. If you can remember the slide that I had up there, we're still not really at the fulcrum because we haven't fully developed the right-hand side of that equation, which is the organic working, a more organic mode of working. Because only when we have those two things in balance can you then be a truly responsive org and manage the tension between those two things. So that's my kind of take on what a responsive org is and how we can kind of work towards getting there. So it's really about developing, and all our work has been put into, has been directed at helping organisations to develop that really organic way of working, what we would call just digital collaboration, I guess, but have it working not just as your standard practices, but as ask the deep questions. Is this the way we want people to work? Are there better ways of doing this? And once you get those two things in balance, then you can sort of manage the tensions between them. So I think that's really the thing that I wanted to bring into this, that it's not just about getting the tools organised. It's not just about supporting the people. It is about asking those really fundamental questions, going back to first principles. And that actually is probably the hardest thing for an organisation to do, is to go back and ask themselves, why are we actually doing it this way? What is our objective at the end of the day, for our teams or for our working groups? So I'll leave it at that and hand it back to you, Woodsy.
Very good. Well, I have to say, I'm going to pivot now, but I have to say you're on the organic side of that equation and the digital tools. Having Angus Florance now speak next, certainly this is right in the wheelhouse of Yammer, and we know which obviously Gus is heavily involved with still. It technically, just a reminder, everyone, 2020 is the year of Yammer. So not the pandemic, and so I'll get Gus to ask the same question. Now, I know that Abi is really worried because is she going to have anything to say after all these great suggestions we've had? So she's looking a bit worried. So don't don't go overboard, Gus. And I must say, just to show how non-hierarchical we were, you worked with Yammer. So firstly, the interview process. I know that my interview with Gus involved a beer in Melbourne. So that was a very hierarchical, formal way of doing things. And technically, Gus was my hierarchical boss for a year, but you'd never know it the way we behave. So and poor Tom's had a go at trying to be my boss as well, and Tom Hiskett. So you'll hear a bit from him later. So we very much embrace the responsive org, non-hierarchical approach to doing things, and I think we called the three of us in the day the Wolf Pack if we add Luke Grange to the group. Anyway, Luke unfortunately can't join us this time, so he's going to be involved in the next responsive org event. He's going to help us set us up. So Gus, how have things been in Yammerland? How have your clients been in 2020?
Yeah, thank you, Woodsy. I've never heard that nickname before. That's going to stick, I think, Woodsy. I like it. Yeah, we'll get to that. I just wanted to jump on a couple of the points I think have already been made because I don't think you'll give me another chance to talk. One, I think, was Kjaer. Yeah, it was 2016. We were at Berkeley, Kjaer, for the first Responsive Org conference, which was pretty epic. And I've been to a few since then. A quick plug for it this year. It's happening again, but it's virtual, which is great. So you don't have to fly to New York. You can actually all participate virtually. So check out responsiveconference.com. I think Kjaer made a good point. So Swoop, I think Kjaer, correct me wrong, Swoop was actually born sort of after the responsive org movement. And I've seen you guys grow, sort of start your business from scratch to where you are now. And I think they actually are the model case study for a responsive org. The way that they run it, the way that they work together. It's actually, I've always put Swoop up there as I think one of the best companies I've seen embrace the responsive org model. So they've done a really good job around that. And I think Rita made actually most of my points. So Rita's already said most of the things I wanted to talk about. I did like your point about people are sort of reassessing what work means to them. I think personally I've done that very much over the last few months, and around attracting talent and those type of things. And then Alister, very quickly for you, I just want to give another plug for your book because it is a very good book and I think everyone should read it. And I got it as a gift from Kjaer. So there you go, we got full circle here. Very responsive. In terms of customers and feedback that I am hearing, again, I think you've covered most of the stuff. I think what I'm finding interesting working with a bunch of different companies all over the world is you can actually, this COVID pandemic has really highlighted the unresponsive organizations, not even organizations, but I think even teams. I think what we're seeing now, which I kind of am, maybe enjoying too much, is we're actually seeing that middle management when they don't have a physical team to look over and watch and manage. A lot of them are wondering, Alister talked about going back to first principles, why are we doing this? The biggest trick with that, I think, is going to be the people asking that question are the people trying to work out what do they do now? If all their employees are remote and they are talking to each other without us looking over their shoulder and having to be involved and connect the dots for them, what is the role of the middle manager anymore? And how do we take those networks or the existing hierarchies and make them, I guess, how do they exist in this new world where you don't have someone physically looking over your shoulder every day? So, and I've seen companies really struggle with that, I think, at the moment, who really relied on those structures, and when, as a group, we would probably classify them as unresponsive, and that's really being highlighted now as part of COVID. So I'll leave it at that. I've got some other stuff to add later if you want, but I know Abi's very keen, and I'm actually keen to hear Abi talk as well. So I'll take a step back and let Abi go for it.
Well, we're looking forward to hearing from Abi. I think she's doing things a bit differently even this week. I think she's not even working in, I don't know where she's working. She'll have to explain where she's working physically. But I know Abi has been involved in organising responsive events in Sydney with us. She was also with Gus and I, customer success manager for Yammer. She's also worked with Engage Squared. So she should have a whole lots of different perspectives on how organisations are maybe being more responsive in 2020. Abi, hi.
Hi there, thanks very much. So yeah, welcome to my very fancy motel room in Coonabarabran near the Warrumbungle. So I'll get to that later, but to address the question around how has my organisation that I work for and our customers been more responsive. So I work for a company called Deputy, which is a tech startup, I guess, but it's a bit older than your average tech startup, headquartered in Sydney, but founded in 2008. And the majority of clients we work with are hospitality and retail, or should I say were hospitality and retail. So it's been a bit of a rocky road for the company and also our clients, and really interesting, as you say, having come from a lens where I have worked or been involved in the responsive org and now joined this company that is going through a really interesting time, to see what they did and what we did and how things changed. So just a few things that happened. So because we are heavily involved in those kind of industries that were some of the hardest hit, not all of the hardest hit, but some of the hardest hit, we were affected in terms of, addressing the elephant in the room. We were affected. We had to get rid of a third of the workforce, so that's quite big, and make a lot of people. Mark's like, don't share this. I'm being honest. I'm being transparent. And so I had to kind of rethink and do things a little bit differently. So if you can imagine, we had the same number of customers who were really struggling, really having a hard time, and 2/3 of the workforce. We had to really change what we did and how we did it. So immediately we started doing cross-functional teams. So pulled together, for example, recruitment, because there wasn't much recruitment going on, sales, customer success, and just called hundreds of our customers to say, are you okay? Just to check in, say, are you okay, and can we help in the best way we can? Bearing in mind, we're also affected, but you are, so what can we do? We also realized quite quickly, to Alister's point, that we needed a revised vision, because if we had to really aggressively prioritize now, then we needed to make sure that the vision we're working towards was the right one, and we could prioritize around that. So redid our vision really quickly, and everyone bought into that, so that was really great and really helped. So really kind of unplugged for that. Also, in terms of a product team, it was almost like someone got a rocket and put it under the product team, because they realized that the customers we were servicing had completely different needs now. They needed to be able to do takeaway, pivot their businesses completely differently. They needed a job keeper report that was built, I think, by the engineering team in a day, where it would normally take them much longer than that. We also started working a lot with healthcare. So I started working with, for example, Ministry of Health in a different company. I've just realized I probably shouldn't say customer names, but hey. So I had to kind of give product requirements for those kind of that industry instead. So just the whole company really changed. And I have to say, for the better, in my view. It's really made us much faster, much smarter in how we work. We've got offices in London and the US. So we've become, I think for the first time, sense of a global team, a global company, whereas before we used to do things quite in silo, but you can't really afford to do that if you don't have as many people, so you have to be smarter. So we've done huge global projects for the first time. So I guess looking at it from the lens of responsive org, it's if you think of what Alister showed earlier on that slide of what companies used to be and what responsive org and what we're trying to get to, it's just completely fast forwarded the Deputy, the company I work for, along that line. And I still think there's a long way to go, but it's been really awesome to see one of the kind of positive things to come out of this not so positive global environment and experience. So really interested to see how that continues, how we bridge the remainder of the gap, and compare it to other companies and what they're doing.
It's great sharing, Abby. As always, very, very interesting. I think yeah, I think that acceleration of decision making and quite big structural things people have had to do very quickly as an organisation. And I love the fact you reach out and ask organisations, are they okay? I mean, that's really like, are you okay day for responsive org? That's really cool. So I'm sure we've got a few questions. Mel Grant.
Yes,
we do. Otherwise, I'll ask the same question of you. But if you want to take the questions of that we've had from the audience, that would be a great contribution.
Yep, we do. We have a few. Anonymous has asked, what do the panelists think are the basic social norms of a responsive organisation? So we have written that trust is something that really is absolutely fundamental for a responsive organisation. But is there anyone who wanted to add anything else to what social norms would be required for a responsive organisation? Don't forget to unmute yourself if you want to add something here.
The first thing I would suggest, I'm going to leap in here, is to say if you go to responsive.org and you actually look at the manifesto, there you'll actually have quite a lot around, that's a good starting point to look at social norms. Any other panelists got a suggestion?
I don't know if it's a social norm, but probably a process that companies will look to now, and Rita touched on this, is the hiring process. And it comes back to trust, but we're used to hiring people from a very small pool around the office that we needed to do. And I think COVID and even before COVID, responsive will force people to change the way they hire, change the way they think about talent, change the way they think, how they're going to integrate people into an organization when they're never going to see them before. And I think, again, I go back to Swoop. I think they've done a great job of things like that. I think that if anyone's read a book called A Year Without Pants, it's a great story of Automatic who have hired people from around the world. I think that is one. I don't know if you call it a social norm, but something that more companies are going to have to think about with this.
I think the vast majority of the people we've hired, we haven't met before, and oftentimes it'll take 3, 6, 9, and 12 months before we actually even meet face to face. And it's entirely possible. I guess I'm saying that with the qualification that we are a small company. So I guess we're not tied up in the history of certain hiring processes. And in my experience, in terms of social norms, what I've found is really important is when you are working in these sort of like self-directed, almost like autonomous teams, and you are working virtually and remotely, having a sense of drive and wanting to accomplish something and not sitting and waiting for someone to do something is really important. And I think most of us that are, and I remember that from when I was working in the corporate, if you sit there and say, oh, I'll just wait for my colleague to come back and I'll ask, I'll just wait for this. There's just no time for that now. And it's when you're working from home, you can be sitting there working forever. And I think it's really hard. So drive, accountability, and just doing things. I think something certainly that I found is really, really important to get this to work.
Yeah, but I could just chuck in something just on the flip side of that a little, is the feeling that it's not just who you hire, but the new hires who come in, that they feel they have permission to be honest and open, rather than us, looking at the incoming people, that they come in and they feel that they have permission to be honest and open and candid. And if they don't have that, then you're always going to struggle, I think.
I think, Alister, building on that, sorry, very quickly, it's leadership who do that. It's leadership who display the behaviors that make people feel comfortable when they come in. If your leadership aren't open and transparent and welcoming and even just authentic, you're going to have trouble bringing new employees in to if you want them to be like that as well. So we really need our leadership they set the standard and the behavior of what we want the entire organization to do.
Yeah, and I can definitely 100%. Add on there. I can definitely add on there because I have actually lived that experience in the last couple of months, being new to Engage Squared. A couple of staff I had met before, but most of the team I hadn't. And so one, just sort of promising myself that if I don't know how to do something or I don't know who to talk to, that I will actually ask, rather than sit at home going, I don't know what to do. I've been really surprised how much you don't, when you're sitting in an office near people, you absorb the noises that are going on around you, and oh, that guy's Dave, or he's the one who whatever. And sitting at home, you feel like there's a big company out there and everybody knows everything except for you. And so yeah, I've had plenty of people reach out and say, can I help you? Don't forget to ask the dumb questions, all that sort of stuff. Plus, there is some social things that go on as well that have helped me feel like part of the team from very early on, which has been a great experience.
I wanted to mention our children, actually, bizarrely enough. So I've watched my kids doing their distance learning. Watching my kids do the distance learning and observing some of the things that they behave, that they demonstrate in their behaviour. And so, they're not scared to ask the question. So it was, Mel, your comments that prompted me to think about this. They're not afraid to be a bit vulnerable and be curious and ask those questions. Whereas we adults, still many of us were wired to believe that it's impolite to speak out and just be quiet and get on with things. And so this whole rewiring has to occur for us to be okay with being that way and behaving in a way that enables us to be curious and to ask the questions and not think it's impolite or weird. I still think there's a large whack of us adults that really struggle with this idea that we feel like we have to have all the answers. And, all bets are off. We've seen into people's lounge rooms. We've seen their kids, their cats, their dogs, like, really? Is this such a big leap for us to make? I don't think
there definitely has been more humanity through this period of time. So, so being vulnerable and letting yourself be vulnerable, giving yourself permission and like you said, knowing that no one has all of the answers. So I guess that's my answer to the second question, Mark, of what have you done personally differently is given myself permission to ask the dumb questions. There's a couple of other questions in the panel. Did you want to address those?
I think we better keep going. Like, as you've asked the question about what have you done differently as an individual, I think it would be good. We'll just quickly just ask a couple more of the panelists what they've actually done. One quick little story from me. I had a meeting last week and we had a CEO and a CIO of a major company, like, has really got the half-hour meeting, and was Justin and I. So you have 4 middle-aged blokes, right, on a really serious half-hour meeting, and then suddenly in the middle of this beautifully dressed 7-year-old came out in a full school uniform and came and went up to the one of our clients and sort of said, "Can you open the jar?" And without flinching, the guy sort of opened the jar, so to go back to her, say thank you for us, and she trotted back. And what was really interesting is the 4 middle-aged blokes, we sort of said, "Oh, that's nice," and we just carried on. And it's like, isn't that great that suddenly those things, we're suddenly seeing a 7-year-old, and it was a beautiful touch. Anyway, how's it been for you personally? I'll go back to Abi because I'm still intrigued. What motel where are you working? You're meant to be working, Abi.
I am working. Don't be giving anyone else any ideas. So during this period, kind of back to the company I'm working for at the moment, previous to this, half the company, the go-to-market side of the company, there wasn't a hugely flexible working policy, so we were in an office all the time. And so obviously when COVID hit, suddenly everything changed, which is a world I'm much more comfortable with. I'm much more used to working from home or working from different places. But it was a bit of a change. Also adding to that, I was also made a manager for the first time, just before COVID hit. So suddenly I'm thrown into the world of flexible working management, which has been really interesting to address Gus's point of what do middle managers do in this new world. So I was working from home for a little bit, and then I decided that actually why work from home when I can work from anywhere else. So for the majority of this period, my partner and I have just been in a car and driving around different places in New South Wales when we could, when the state was open. So we're still on that road trip. I was in Lightning Ridge over the weekend, and now I'm down near Coonabarabran. But it's been really interesting because it's made me have to showcase flexible working and all the benefits of it, and really prove that it's great and it's as productive. And but also for me, I've always been someone, and if Luke was on this call, he would also agree, who I think differently in different places. So I'll always move around. Tom might be smiling because I used to do this when I worked for him as well, but I go different places to think differently or to do different types of work. So actually being on the road is like an extended version of that, which I love.
Cool. Alister, what have you been doing? You work from home anyway, don't you, Alister? What's been different for you this year?
Yeah, that part of it's a bit of a luxury, actually. So no big pivot there. But I think for me, it's still about going back to first principles. I just find that I find myself asking that about pretty much everything these days. You know, there's so many learned behaviours that we have or had, you know, prior to COVID, and so many of those are being questioned. I think it's really refreshing to be able to say, well, I would normally be doing that, but is that something I really want to or have to do, or should we do something else? Is it possible just for us to head off for a week and do what Abby's doing, which we have actually done at one stage. So it's asking what's the purpose of and I don't mean what's the purpose of going out to dinner. It's just something that the learned behaviour is that you might just do that at a certain time of the week, but you say, well, it actually doesn't matter what day or whether it's lunch or it can be any other time. So I love that process of shifting away from that whole packet of learned behaviours that we kind of come bundled with, and I feel a bit freer in that sense, and that applies to work, I think, as much as social.
Well, freedom is very much responsive org. What about you, Rita? What's different for you?
Well, see, I'm wearing a dress because I think there needs to be in the Zoom world, or when we're doing video, there needs to be more colour. So I'm trying to stick with that. I've got some other lovely like blue and yellow tops arriving in the mail tomorrow. So I want to just be a little bit more colourful if we're going to be all online here. But on a more serious note, I think I'm really conscious of, in all of frankly, I think there's a lot of noise now in the ether, in Twitter land, on LinkedIn even. There's a lot of people fighting for space there, and I'm just super conscious of always adding value. So I'm not going to just talk or make noise for the sake of it, because I feel like my voice needs to be heard. I will do it when I feel like I add value to my network. So that'd be nice if a few more people thought about their distributed way of working and how they're adding value to all of the networks and being kind of generous and nice to the people around them. That would be really helpful. So that's something that I want to do. And some of you may not know this, but in another life, I am a gym instructor. So the gyms are closed, but I think exercise is everything. I think when you're okay and you feel calm, whether it's yoga or meditation or, whatever it is, I think when you look after yourself, you're better off able to look after everyone else. And we're all wearing different hats. I'm working, I have children at home, all of these things are kind of going on. So I find my exercise is great, and a little bit like Alister. If I feel like doing it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, that's when I'll go and do a workout. None of this business of doing it at 5 a.m. or doing it at 8 o'clock after a working day. The working day is whatever I make it now, and I really like that. Cool.
Kai, I just have this vision. I've had one meeting in the last few months, and that was over at Kai's place, and so we went to we actually even had lunch. Sorry, those in Melbourne, we actually sat down and had lunch, and then we actually went back and had a meeting in his home office, and then we looked at all his kayaks. And so next time, definitely the meeting's going to involve. We're going to have a meeting on kayaks. So I wonder what else you're doing in your great lifestyle out in the northern beaches to be more responsive this year.
Well, I'll give you a little bit. So it's more like of a surprise. Coming into this, being a virtual organization, coming into COVID-19 hitting, we thought, well, we are really well set up for that. We already were working remotely. We have people in Europe, in the US, and here. We always work together collaboratively. It's going to be easy enough. And it was. And when we interacted with each other, it's a little bit like here. You see, I've use that blur in my background, so everything sort of looks nice. But just as with the technology, sort of if I unblur my background and actually turns my camera around, you can sort of start to see the mess in my real office, right? You can see the ironing board, all the mess, right? But I can just turn it around, do this, and it all looks, if I do just like that, it sort of looks quite nice. And when we were working together and we were saying, well, this all works quite nice. We all work with each other. It's really nice and clean. Then we found out when we asked, well, how are you actually? which is why I loved Abby's question to your customers about how are you. Then we find out that we have one of our colleagues in the US, she's got 3 kids and they're all at home. And I think all of us has been stunned by, I have a high school daughter who's in year 12 coming up, you know. There's an enormous amount of stress that this is causing in our lives that is kind of like this thing that happens behind us that is not work, but is deeply impacting work. And this probably what has hit me the most is that you can be really well prepared to work in a responsive, you know, collaborative, you know, really nice company organization to work in. But all this stuff that happens because of COVID-19 has a deep impact on the way that we work together. And I think we're sort of getting the hang of it now and better at understanding each other, where we're coming from. But I think we still really have to be very conscious of taking time to appreciate that all that is still happening behind these really polished backgrounds. And we can make it look, you know, absolutely white, pristine, and nothing is wrong, but we're just hiding reality. And I think that's part of having a lot of trust and openness and transparency. And I think the role that Yammer plays in this, to instant technology, is to have those conversations. I spoke with a very large bank a little while ago, and they ran a poll on Yammer and how do you feel about returning to work? And people were really nervous about public transport and those things. If you ask them about, you know, the opportunity to make food at home with the family, you know, people are really, really excited about that. There was a lot of positive sentiment in the conversations around that. But returning to work was, you know, was much more, I guess, much more, people had much more concerns about that. And I think we have to be so careful. Sorry for such a long, elaborate answer. I guess it's been something that's really been on my mind. We really have to be exceptionally open and honest about the mess in our lives, so we can bring, I guess, we really bring ourselves to work.
Hi, you prompted a question from me. I'd kind of, as part of this discussion and more broadly, COVID seems to have been a great leveler, right? Obviously, some industries are devastatingly affected, but others can continue, but we're all working from home. We all kind of feels like we're on the same page now. But maybe I'm very wrong with that. Maybe it's just more burdensome on those who were suffering disadvantage already, right? I'm curious whether anyone has a view whether working from home and the situation we find ourselves is actually a leveling experience, or whether it's just pushing further down on those who were already disadvantaged. I don't know, maybe I'll ask Rita if she has a view, because you were talking about the leveling the playing field to a degree and the change in people policies, etc.
Sure. I think let's see, I think some leaders have been kind of taken down a peg. They've realized the world is not perfect. You know, they're now struggling at home with their IT support. You know, they haven't got like 10 people that they can just phone to jump into the room to help them now. I think leaders have almost been brought down to perhaps where everyone else is. And then look, and I do think we do have to be mindful of people's personal circumstances. I've personally had some very big shifts in my life. I just sold my house, I've moved, I've done all these things. Like, this stuff is very stressful. So yeah, if I was to look at this in a macro way, I think leaders have kind of got a bit of a dose of reality. The world doesn't sort of smell and of fresh white paint, you know, in the way they've probably been used to for some of them who have maybe not been as close to their people. You know, maybe for everyone else, it's just sort of recognizing there's sort of a diverse range of issues.
Gus, do you have anything on Tom's question or the original question? You've moved the last couple of weeks, and I've just seen a little mini you come in into your room as well, which was very cute. So, and how things been going for you personally as well?
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, we've just moved. We've moved a fair way out of Melbourne into undisclosed location in regional Victoria, which I'm loving at the moment. So we got out of that. I think personally, I tend to think, I probably agree with Kai in my personal experience. I pretty much work from home. I never went to an office per se. before this, but certainly, and thought this will be easy. I work remotely anyway. I certainly saw my colleagues who went to an office every day struggle initially with the shift to being remote and not having those hallway conversations and that sort of stuff. What I really struggled with, probably again to Kjaer's point, was with having the kids at home. I didn't expect that to be as big a initial burden or just distraction as it was. And the only good thing I think about having the 2 waves in Melbourne was the first one kind of prepared us what happened. I feel like the second one has, at least personally for me, has been much, I don't know if it's been easier, but it's just, I've accepted it for what it is. And I think when you realize that everybody's in the same, like you keep feeling, I was feeling the first time around the drag of like, I'm not contributing what I should do at work. I'm not even contributing to what I can do at home. Like my daughter was doing Zoom classes at school, and like that wasn't working, and work wasn't working, and nothing was working. And then it can become quite negative, I think, and you really feel the pressure and stress of it all. But then I think when you realize that, hey, everyone, literally almost in the entire world is in this situation, and you start to build empathy for others, but I think also yourself. So the second time around, I think for me personally, it's just been, you know what, this is what it is. Kids are going to come in. Every kid comes into someone's meeting. Everyone's used to it now. No one even bats an eye anymore. Everyone's very patient and understands what's going on. I think when you allow yourself to accept that, when I've allowed myself to accept, I'm not going to be producing the same level of work, which to be fair was immense before COVID. It's just down a little bit now. It just becomes easier. And then you start to appreciate the other things. Like, this is a rare moment where I get to spend time with my 3-year-old and 5-year-old, where they'd be at school all day and I'd be at work. And we've had 6 months now where we've been together every day, which is great. But it's, we wouldn't get that before. So I think it's interesting. And again, from a personal note, we decided during COVID to reassess what are we doing with our work. Why do we need to live in a city? Where do we want to be? What do we want our kids to do? And so we've made a pretty significant change, and we're 4 days into it, but so far it's pretty good. I assume you can still see me and hear me. We have internet, running water, so we seem to be doing all right.
You reminded me to feel bad about talking about traveling there. Sorry, Gus. And
no, that's a weird thing. I mean, before this, I used to travel all the time, and I loved my trips back to work. And honestly, now, like I don't miss it. I did initially. I was very annoyed at the start that I missed all my trips, but I think I'm at a place now where even if we could start travel again, I don't know if I would. I think I'm in a pretty comfortable spot now where I'd love to do personal travel, obviously, still, and I miss that. But I think my business trips and like traveling to Sydney for a 1-hour meeting or going over the other side of the world for a couple of days conference, I think they're behind me now. I'm very happy with doing stuff remotely.
That does remind me. Sorry, you can shut me up, Mark, if you need to.
No,
but that does remind me. Someone told me from Microsoft, I believe, that on average people are working or spending an extra day a week in front of their computers than they were before. Not sure if that's verified by anyone here, but I think that kind of plays into the diverse experiences that people are finding. Some people are really struggling with the difference between when the workday starts and when it ends in their personal life, and some people are, I think that was just a really interesting fact to me, and it made me really step back and think, actually, what's the outcomes I want to drive, and therefore how much time do I need to allocate, rather than just get sucked into that.
Yeah, it's true, and I think it's also around working out how to restructure how we do things, collaborate with each other, because the danger is that people are spending a lot of times on online meetings. And and then sort of there's trying to change up different ways of whether people need to be in those meetings. And there's one of the questions is, do you think that middle managers need to change their mindset from management to facilitators? There you go. That's a good intro to that question. Any thoughts on that? There's lots of nods I can see from the panel.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in. I think absolutely. I think it's, in some ways, it's a more difficult time for managers than it is for team members. Team members just need to adapt to circumstances, but managers, kind of in some cases, egos are being challenged because they're not in charge in the way that traditionally they are in charge. And I think there's a bigger jump from in some cases, from learned behaviours to new behaviours for managers, because it's there's not that physical presence. It's so much about their world has changed, because now if somebody mentioned before, if two people are talking, it's not talking in a cubicle just over there, it's in some place that you just cannot hear. So yeah, I think that's a huge thing. It's probably a subject in itself, actually.
Good response, Alister. Mel, do you want to pick out one more?
Yeah, we did have one other one that says how important is cultural diversity in getting to new ways of working?
Can I'll give a perspective. I'm not sure it is. Is that controversial? I don't think it requires cultural diversity to get to this, to move to being a responsive organization. Anyway, that I wouldn't necessarily think it would be for lots of other things. So I don't say it's about.
Yes, not saying that cultural diversity isn't beneficial, just not in this.
In this, I don't think it's a requirement in this context.
I do think that geographic diversity is very important. So I work a lot with New York. There's been a real conscious effort to shift meetings to enable me to participate, so they're not happening in the dead of night, when I'm sleeping. So, that's an angle of diversity, is to be inclusive. We need to just think about how are you connecting people at optimal times, and accepting that asynchronous work is also real work. We don't all have to be turning up live all the time for everything.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've done quite a bit of work with a team in America as well, and a few weeks ago now, and they're all having their glass of wine while I've got my coffee and porridge, and it does seem pretty strange.
Don't let that stop you, Mel. Always have the wine.
I didn't say there wasn't whiskey in my porridge, but yeah.
Rita, I think I saw a meme the other day of a kid on Zoom doing schoolwork, and she said to a teacher, "Does this have to be a Zoom meeting? Can't we just do this over email?" And it's funny that how we're like we're shifting before, like we're trying to get out of email, be more responsive now. Like no, we can just solve this asynchronously later, and we don't need an actual meeting for this anymore.
I actually blogged about this earlier in the year when I was observing my kids, and it's really funny. So I think adults, we can learn to be vulnerable and curious and learn that from our kids, but the kids have got to learn some business rules. I've found myself saying to my kids, you have to check your email, not once a week. You've got to look at it every day. I'm like, oh, can't believe I'm saying this, but it's true.
Good luck with that, Rita.
And I just wanted to add also that Matt, who is obviously based in Western Australia, says he completely agrees with Abi about thinking differently in different places. Being over in Western Australia means I can get into an office and I notice the difference much more than being locked down, than before being locked down. He values the transition from, getting out of the house and going to the office rather than just being at home all the time and having that choice.
We think we know who that Matt is. That's his footprint. Yes, interesting. And I think that's as we do go back in different ways, or things change from the current to what the new normal is going to be. I think we're going to have new experiences, like the sheer excitement of going to see Kjaer for lunch was just, and now Kjaer's a really interesting guy.
He's pretty excited. Come on.
He's a pretty exciting guy for lunch.
It was the lunch.
It was the highlight of my month, So I think what we actually start to appreciate will certainly be different as we move forward. Well, we don't have to finish on time because we're a responsive lot and we're agile and we can keep going. And I know that I have personally had a great time interacting with you all. We have had a few of our little technical issues behind the scenes. So doing something virtually when you can't get everyone in a room just has proved a couple of challenges. But I really appreciate all the speakers' time and effort, because I can see you're all doing this because you're passionate about the subject, and hopefully there's some impetus to do a bit more. I think it's a really good time to be doing more around responsive org, and I hear they're making a documentary. There's some really interesting things that we'll be able to pick up from overseas. Tom, you came on briefly. You've been involved in our responsive org for a few years. You want to add anything from all these speakers that you know well?
Yeah, I certainly don't have any profound closing statements, Mark. But certainly what I love about responsive org is the conversational nature of it. Right, since COVID started, everyone's doing a webinar, including ourselves. Everyone's doing some kind of online presentation, and lots of interesting content, but it's all very structured and scripted. But I always love the responsive conversational nature, and I think that's translated to a digital experience. Certainly felt great as a participant. Hopefully the audience appreciated this kind of format. And the most exciting thing is that there are so many more members of the community that we can have this conversation with next week, or next month, or whenever we can plan it, rather. So we look forward to continuing the conversation in future. Thanks, Mark.
Yes, thanks, Tom. And yes, I know that Luke Grange just tell everyone how good this has been. He's going to be so disappointed, and so this will be a great impetus to organise the next one, which we'll certainly do. I'll just quickly go around any closing. This is those sort of closing comments. You know, insiders. Those of us watch Insiders. You get the last thing. So you can sort of. I'll go around the mulberry bush and see if you'd like to sort of close out with something, and we'll hopefully all participate in the next version of Responsible that we do. Go on, Rita. You've got your hand up first. And understanding the school structure that we're working to. Very good.
A quick plug for ESN Chat, which is at the awful time of 4 a.m. on Friday morning, which is 2 p.m. Eastern time Thursday. We're actually talking about new joiners, so we've talked a bit about that. So if people want to carry on the conversation around what it's like to join an organisation when you don't turn up to an office, we're going to be talking about it on Friday.
Awesome. And I see in the chat there was someone saying that Carlton Connect, which is now Melbourne Connect, hosted something yesterday with around innovation around precincts influencing future industries. There's a whole lot of responsive stuff in that, so definitely look up Melbourne Connect. That sounds an interesting something just seen in the chat. Abby, before you go on your bushwalk?
No, for me, it's just been really lovely to all get together again and start to have this conversation and remind, you know, if you don't think about something for so long, you almost forget you know it, and then you all come together and remind yourselves. So I guess just don't be strangers, everyone in the wider responsible community, and let's keep in touch and keep each other moving in this direction.
Nice. Gus?
So I better give a plug to Ignite. So our big conference is coming in September. It's free. There's going to be 2 days plus thousands of hours worth of content, so you can sit in front of your computer longer in your office and watch that, which would be good. There's lots of cool stuff coming there. But I think personally, I would just encourage everyone. Probably for the last 18 months, I'm completely off social media, everything, and I cannot recommend it enough. I think everyone should at least try it for a day, if not a month, if not longer. So give yourself a break, go outside, put your phone away, and try and be a digital minimalist for a while, because it's certainly liberating. I've enjoyed it.
Nice. Alister, if you go off mute, we can hear your punchy your punchy final takeaway.
Look, a little plug for what we've got coming up in the next sort of week or so. We're going to finally, after months of delaying because of COVID, launch the digital team builder kit with it, which is card card play, etc. But I think, generally speaking, for me, I mentioned it before, it's that unpacking of how we sort of lived and worked previously, unpacking those kind of learned behaviours. I think it's refreshing. I think it's certainly, for me, it's put the positive spin on everything that is, to counterbalance all the negative stuff that's occurred because of COVID.
Yeah, point. I'd love Lauren to say something finally. I don't know if she can go. I don't think she can go on screen, but as our producer. But can I say that Lauren has done an amazing job behind the scenes as our producer? Yeah, we're all clapping. Do you want to contribute anything, Lauren, or are you just going to smile and giggle?
Smile and giggle.
Good on you, Lauren. And Mel, you've done a great job. Thank you for patiently walking me through how to do a live event with so many panelists, because it's been a blast. Anything final from you?
Yeah, no, my pleasure. I'm just, as I said, we started at the beginning. I've got a new puppy, and she's been screaming her head off downstairs. But whenever I'm unmuted, she seems to be quiet. So, thank you to her for that.
You've trained her. You've trained her very well.
When Mummy speaks, you shut up.
Very good. Well, everyone, take care. Thank you for joining. It's been absolutely swell, and we will definitely be doing this again. So when you're not having a social media chill out, as Gus is suggesting, then go to Meetup, go to our website, go to Responsive Org, and we'll do something. Stay tuned, and we'll try and do something in 6 weeks or so, and because it's been great fun. Bye for now. Stay responsive. See you.